To December 25. I'm Bear from the internet. Usually on Tuesdays, I will do something to the effect of a coffee time sermon of talking about the Word and the Word made flesh, driving in the truck to work. Today's going to be a little bit different. I'm going to talk to you about the GATE program, of which I was a part. Gifted and talented education, which on the surface sounds like nothing special. I would encourage you to do some research on this, though, and think about all the other governmental programs that have the word GATE in them. So I don't think it's a coincidence that Gifted and Talented Education, GATE, was the acronym that was chosen here for reasons that we'll get into. And I have done my best to order my thoughts into some notes here. Go ahead, take a screenshot if you want. Okay. But this is the first time I've ever talked about this. So, we'll get into it. First of all, happy Giving Tuesday. Shout out to grindstoneministries.com and calebhouse.org. 100% supported by y'all and not the government. And this is a contributing factor as to why I don't trust the government nor public schooling. So the GATE program that I can ascertain, and this is all recently came to light within the last 24 hours, a lot of suppressed memories, a lot of suppressed traumas and manipulations that have just been coming back because I've actually had a moment of free time to sit still because I am currently a little under the weather, which makes me think that my workaholism is a coping mechanism, although Dr. Trevor probably could have told me that. And so this has been, I didn't sleep last night. This has been punching me in the face ever since then, of a whole lot of dormant, suppressed memories, which is a missing time, years of which is a commonality amongst those who were in the GATE program. And I don't have this all figured out. So if you were part of this, please hit me in the comments and tell me if your experiences line up with mine. So the GATE program that I can ascertain began in the late 1970s and ran through the 1990s-ish, predominantly in middle schools, but more likely in elementary schools, public elementary schools. I was enrolled in the New York public school system, upstate New York, and then later downstate New York, which we'll get to perhaps in a bit. There appears to be multiple tiers to the GATE program. For some people, they were in the program and they have no memory of anything weird. Take that for what it is. For others, they were in the program and they remember going to a separate classroom, or in many cases, a separate, like a trailer, like a single wide that was on the school property. And this dovetails with my memory, where all the windows were blacked out. So there's no light, natural light coming in. And so some people were in the program, they have no memory of anything nefarious whatsoever. Other people were in the program, and they remember going to this special classroom or trailer once per week. I went every day. Now, I think the reason that I went every day, so it appears that there were tiers to this program. A little bit of backstory. My dad, who is now passed, was wildly, wickedly smart, but not in a nerdy kind of way. very strong, calloused hands man. I mean, he's named on the patent for the connector to splice fiber optic cable, and he did the first microwave communications in the United States between New York City and Boston, and had a TSSCI clearance, top secret sensitive compartmentalized information clearance. He wired Strategic Air Command by himself because he was the only one with the clearance, and spent a lot of time at White Sands Missile Range. And we had some very interesting bring your kids to work days, although I was the only one that went on those. The rest of my siblings did not, that I can remember. And so I was in a different tier, apparently, of gate. I went every day. Now, mind you, when it comes to cognitive ability, I remember testing in the 99.8 percentile of all students. So out of 1,000 students, I was in the top 2 students out of 1,000. So my dad was very smart. He also had an incredible force of will. What do I mean by that? I mean, he was paralyzed from the waist down and then decided that he wasn't anymore, and literally taught himself to walk again and walked out of the hospital. And that's just one instance. I can remember one time him saying to me, "Son, be very, very careful about what you focus on and what you put your intent on, because we are powerful." And I said, "What do you mean by?" I was a young man. He said, "Well, when I was in high school, son, there was a kid stole my girlfriend from me, and it pissed me off. And I remember laying in bed all night and just focusing, visualization, focusing on him getting into a terrible car accident as payback for taking my girlfriend." And that night he did. He's like, and I think that I took that man's life with, I know this sounds crazy, right? By the way, just so we're all on the same page here, Christ is Lord. And Abba, Father, Yahweh, the creator of the heavens and the earth, is still sovereign over all. But my dad said, I think I took that kid's life last night just by focusing on it too much. So be careful what you focus on. And so my dad was extremely smart and was just a force of nature when it came to his will and focusing his will. Conversely, my mom, my dad was much more right brain. My mom is much more left brain, or vice versa. My mom she's still alive, incredibly creative and incredibly loving, just a saint. But her visual acuity and spatial awareness is literally off the charts. I remember my mom being tested for that. It's literally off the charts. And then I remember taking the tests that my mom took that she scored off the charts on and beating my mom's scores. I remember that as a little kid. So I guess that's my pedigree there. So I was in a different tier of gate. I went daily, not weekly. Now, what do we do in gate? A lot of visualization. Now, oftentimes there would be manila envelopes filled with, these are target packets. This is the same thing that Ingo Swann was doing, astral projection for reconnaissance, that the Army and the CIA were spending time investing elsewhere, Fort Meade and many other places. Stanford Research Institute. So we'd be given an envelope and be asked to draw what they didn't tell us was in the envelope, it was sealed. Draw what we think was in the envelope. And in hindsight, the drawing was a focusing of intent, a focusing of will, and a tuning of energy, if you will. And the drawing was less important than the explanation of the drawing was. The explanation of the drawing was where the intelligence value was at. By the way, all of this was being proctored not by a teacher at the school, but by a military-aged male. I can't remember what his face looked like, but well-dressed, buzz cut. And when I say well-dressed, I mean properly dressed. Crisp lines, buzz cut. One of those, not quite a Rolex watch, like one of those Mariner watches, you know what I'm talking about? So we would do a lot of visualization. Tangrams, which were these puzzles that, three-dimensional puzzles where the shapes were rhomboids, and you'd have to assemble them. Now, this is also a factor, at least for me. I am extraordinarily colorblind. Extraordinarily colorblind. I have testing done on this as well. It occurs to me now, in hindsight, I've had a lot of testing done on me. The average human being can ascertain about 100,000 different colors and shades. For me, the number is 10, not 100,000. I have next to no, red, blue, yellow receptors in my eyes. But as a result, because of that, because the Lord gives and the Lord takes away, the takeaway was color, but the give is my ability to see at night. I have about 4 times the number of, rods? Cones. Sorry, did I mention I didn't sleep last night? About 4 times the normal amount. And so at night in the dark, as long as there's no light pollution, I see like there's a dim light bulb on in the room. That's how I see at night. And so I bring that up because the tangrams had a color code to them. There was also a game, it was a mess of string, and it was like a square board with pegs in it, and there was all kinds of different colored yarns wrapped around it, and you had to not just untangle the knot on the board, but explain the process. First, I pull the green one, and then the red one, and then the blue one, and then the yellow one, and then back to the green, and document all of that, write all that. Mind you, this is for children who are between the ages of 5 and 12-ish. And the reason for that is the brain state at that age, as well as the fact that these children are malleable. And a very constant, consistent thing for me in the GATE program was an appeal to authority. Now, it's interesting. There's layers to that too, because when it comes to an appeal to authority, for me, it's whose authority at this point. I don't do well with worldly authority, and I think part of why this program existed, and it may still exist, I don't know. It's been a while since I've been in grade school, and if you have similar experiences, please let me know. Part of why this program existed is to identify those that might be a problem. Me, I think I'm a problem from their vantage point. I think I have been for a long time. So we do these string puzzles. There were also computer games, not just Oregon Trail, although Oregon Trail was definitely a feature. Maybe that's where my interest in survival and preparedness comes from. But there was also a game, I believe it was called Scorched Earth, where basically we would launch, it was a very early computer simulation where you'd have to do the calculations to launch like artillery, like analog artillery, to launch shells of napalm and other weapons onto other countries. We were asked to do a report on how would you take over the world? Okay, and then another one, what if Japan was a problem? Do you see parallels? Think about what I do today. The intel briefs that I bring you all Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Oh, we'll touch on that as well. So this game, I believe it was called Scorched Earth, where you would launch projectiles on a very early LAN local area network against other real world players in the gifted and talented education program. There were lots of puzzles, and lots of problem solving. And this is key. Most of this, at least for me, I remember there was just a handful of other kids, maybe 4 more other kids. And they weren't always there on the same day, same time. I was there every day. I did this in the dark, like lights out, windows, completely shaded, in the dark. I think you might think that I might be uncomfortable in the dark at this point. I'm actually not. I'm actually quite comfortable in the dark. And maybe it's just reps and sets from that. And the fact that I can see better in the dark than most people can. So again, this was a separate room with a different air quote teacher. It's not anybody else from the school. It was, again, a military age male, if I had to guess, 5'10", 180. Not overly stocky, but not a beanpole either. I remember his outline. The program had a combination of left brain kids and right brain kids in there. And I think I'm a both kid. I think that also contributed to me going every day, not once a week. I think I'm a both kid. My mom's one, my dad's the other, and I can see that. I mean, in drumming and in music and in math. Oh, that's another thing. Math. The occipital bun, base of the skull. It's a little, they call it an evolutionary holdover. There's a little bump right there at the base of the skull. And it seems to be occipital bun. Or math bump. You can Google that. There seems to be a lot of correspondence between children who were in gait and the presence of the occipital bun, the math bump. And I also have that. One of the things that they were absolutely looking for, that I would consider one of my gifts, is pattern recognition. Whether, again, this is drumming and very complex drumming, or local, regional, state level, national, international geopolitics pattern recognition, biblical pattern recognition. It's pattern recognition. And my brain is like a sponge. Also, apparently a consistency amongst gate kids was multicolored pupils. So right now, I have very brown eyes. But it wasn't always that way when I was younger. I had a little ring of blue on the inside. Not on the outside, on the inside. That has since gone. And I think it's called multichromia. You can Google that. But that's apparently a consistent pattern amongst gate kids. Now, I thought this was normal because as a kid, I didn't know. But we took field trips, and we took field trips to, for lack of a better word, military bases, installations. And now, this was not just with gate. This was also with my dad. And I guess that's not normal. It's also important to point out, my dad ran away from home when he was 15. He got into telecommunications. By the time he was 19, he had his own company. And he started doing, fiber optics later in life. And then he never finished high school, but he was 1/4 of Bell Atlantic, New York's engineering department, designing these massive projects. And then he also held government contracts, one of which was to provide computer systems to the government. Because of his TSSCI clearance and some of the work that he had done on bases, he started a company called AIT, American Ingenuity and Technology. And the procurement officer had said to my dad, Sam, I don't care if you buy somebody else's computers and just put your label on them and sell them to us. We want to do business with you because we trust you. And my dad, being my dad, said, no, we're going to do business, I'll build computers. He didn't know anything about computers. So he took a drafting table. We used to draw, and I would help my dad as a child draw blueprints for these, gigantic telecommunications projects. I would draw blueprints with him. And so he took a drafting table, which is usually an angle like this, and turned it flat. And got a piece of carpet and laid it over the top for static electricity, and started ordering in all these computer parts. And we built computers, Pentium 286 chips and 2400 baud modems. And this is during the days of BBS bulletin board service and all of this, and LAN, local area networks. And we built these. And there seems to be at least a consistency when it comes to GATE as far as computers. A very early use of computers and computer technology by these students. And I was building it downstairs in my dad's house. AIT was in the downstairs floor of the house. My bedroom was next door. Outside my bedroom was my dad's office, and in his office was his drafting area for engineering. Again, mind you, he ran away from home when he was 15, never completed high school, but brilliant. And his engineering office and his computer office, where we would build computers and individually test them, and insert the microprocessing chips and build it out. I mean, literally configure the BIOS, basic input output system, all of that. It's not just bolting parts together. So that's it. That's interesting. And as far as field trips to military bases, I thought that was just something the kids did. Apparently, no. But we did that both with GATE. Oftentimes, I want to say we're on Saturdays. And then also with my dad traveling for work. I have been solicited since I was about 17 years old by various different arms of the tentacles of the intelligence community. In fact, even recently, within the last 30 days. And it happens regularly. I was frankly solicited after Hurricane Helene by a very well-known individual in American geopolitics to basically get on the team to join the resistance. I was like, no thank you. By the way, I am not suicidal, and since we're coming up on the holiday season, ho ho ho, now I have a machine gun. Don't start no shit, won't be no shit. Okay? I have no interest in retribution or reparation or whistleblowing or anything like that. I'm just dealing with a flood of repressed memories. But I've been solicited by the intelligence community, and at times have knowingly and apparently unknowingly worked with them since I was 17. And so that's more than 2.5 decades. I just recently had a guy say to me, "You're excellent at this intel stuff. I would love it if you come work for me. These briefs that you're giving are tremendous." No. Remember that problem with authority thing that I've got? I'd rather talk to you guys about the important things than write a white paper that nobody's going to read while keeping y'all in the dark. I'm not cool with that. It goes back to I'm comfy in the dark. I have had coincidence, the hand of the Most High, the unseen hand of man, I don't know. I've had, or maybe it's just the archetype, again, of the military-aged male proctor. I've had 6 Green Beret mentors since I was 15 years old. 6. We're talking 1% of 1%. And 6 of these men have poured into my life at different times. Some of them I'm not friends with anymore. Some of which I love dearly and hold in the highest esteem. But that's an interesting coincidence, we might call it. Another common consistency is the pink drink, or also some people report pink tablets like Necco tabs. There's a pink drink in the little 8-ounce clear plastic cups, like mini Solo cups. We'd have to drink the pink drink. And what the pink drink was, nobody knows. There's conjecture. Some people say it's fluoride used to calcify the pineal gland to turn off these God-given latent abilities that this GATE program was apparently selecting for with the intention to weaponize. And others say, no, it was low-dose hallucinogens akin to MK Ultra. Maybe. But there was a pink drink. New York State, this is another thing for me. I was a problem to them. I think I am still a problem to them. I was getting in trouble at school regularly for the dumbest shit. Now, I also had kids who tried to beat me up regularly and beat up my friends regularly because my crew at school was all the weird kids that didn't, all the men without a country. The mathlete and the overweight band girl and the one football kid that didn't want to be on the football team, and the 90-pound soaking wet Jewish kid, and that was my crew. And everybody would pick on them, and so I'd beat the shit out of the people that picked on them. Reasonable. But I also got in trouble for lots of other dumb stuff. I got a 2 months out of school for suspension for bringing a dangerous weapon to school, and I had a pocket knife that was that big, had an 1.5 inch blade on it, that I would use to cut the strings on hay bales. And looking back on it, that was the beginning of a 2-year escapade. 2 years of my family ending up in family court with New York State trying to take me, not my sisters, not any of the other kids in the house, me, out of the house. And my dad fought them tooth and nail. Remember that sheer force of will? In hindsight, and I did not have the best relationship with my dad, but in hindsight, I think what he was trying to do was keep me from them. And that's very honorable and admirable. And I was oblivious to it. I had to go weekly during this time to a bunch of court-appointed counselors and therapists during this 2-year period. We always sat in the dark. There was one guy, it's a Jewish guy, younger guy, reddish Jew fro. I thought you said you're colorblind. Yeah, I'm colorblind, not stupid. He was a problem. I had to go there weekly. And in hindsight, what he was doing was elicitation, getting me to divulge information, or trying to get me to divulge information. My dad was able to find out that this guy was not a licensed therapist in the state of New York, or a psychologist, or a psychiatrist, or no, he's not a mental health professional, but he had an office in with the mental health professionals where myself and presumably others would go meet with him once a week for therapy, where we'd sit in the dark and this guy would try to elicit information from us. And I remember telling that individual, I was about 13 at this point. Now, again, the age of interest appears to be 5 to 12, and that has to do, I think, with the state of the brain. But I remember telling this individual that I would kill him, that he was evil and that I would kill him. And he made some snarky comment, something like, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Because I'm willing to assume that my dad had said the same thing to him. Well, then why did you go? Because if we didn't comply with the court's orders, then they would have taken us anyway. And the prosecutor told my dad after this 2-year escapade was settled, he said, you are the only father in this district that has kept his kids. Yeah, praise the Most High for that force of will, huh? Into my later teens and early 20s. Oh, by the way, another common, consistent factor or data point amongst gate kids is near-death experiences. Particularly drowning seems to be popular. That I know of, I should currently be dead 6 times. 6. There's that number again. Starting as early as 8 years old. So, I believe the man upstairs has other plans for me. But near-death experiences, NDEs, lots of them. With the belief being that the near-death experience wakes up dormant physiological psychic abilities within people. Into my mid and late teens, into my 20s, is a result of a lot of things. I was highly sexual. Like, highly. A very large amount of narcotics. I'm one of the only people I know that spent more than $1 million cash on cocaine. My cash, not the CIA's cash. Hallucinogens. I stopped counting how many tabs of acid I had done at 300 because I was like, who cares at this point? And I continued to do acid for a significant amount of time after I stopped counting. And all kinds of other experimental drugs. 2CT2, 2CT7, obviously mushrooms and all that. An incredible amount of alcohol. These are all coping mechanisms, by the way. And engaging in lots of risky behavior. Now, I was also diagnosed, air quote, around the age of 14 with multiple personality disorder and manic depressive whatever. I don't buy that. I remember, so I was given a couple of prescriptions and they just made me completely numb I could literally feel nothing. I was like a shell, a husk of a human being. The reason that this left arm has a full sleeve of tats, it's really just one giant tat that goes from my wrist up to my top of my shoulder, full wrap all the way around, is that this one arm has more than 1,000 scars on it. Because I would literally cut myself just to be able to feel something. Anything, any input, any data. Because otherwise I was so incredibly numb, I felt nothing. And I remember flushing those pills down the toilet. Literally. I was like, never again, not doing it. If I have these things that they say that I have, I'll just learn to live with it. And I don't believe that I do. I've done a fair bit of study on cluster B personality complexes and Jungian psychology. And I mean, one of my best friends is literally the only therapist in the world with his stack of credentials. And I'm not a great guy, but I don't believe I suffer from those mental maladies that they labeled me with. I think the label was an excuse to get me to take the pills to subdue who I am. Back to GATE. GATE was very much so physics meets psychics. I told you I did a lot in the dark. What I did in the dark included astral projections, out-of-body experiences, the use of intuition and premonition. There were card games that we played to guess, to know what the next card was that was going to be pulled, or the next shape, or the next word out of somebody, just to know. And I am highly intuitive. It's something it's been a blessing and a curse my whole life. There were headphones, like you'd take your hearing test at the nurse's office, but it was not a hearing test. They were binaural beats used in order to bring the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere of the brain into synchronicity from a frequency standpoint, because the two sides vibrate at different frequencies. One's at 8 hertz, the other is at 13 hertz. So you need to raise the one, lower the other, and then that creates a unity or a singularity, if you will, which switches the antenna on and tunes it to the right frequency in order to be able to have access to other physical abilities. So we did that, engaged in a wide array of what Crowley would call occult phenomena. I literally remember being instructed on lectures on Jungian psychology and just Freud and all. I mean, again, we're talking ages 5 to 12 here. It does not surprise me that later in life, after this program, I played drums in a satanic metal band for a decade and studied every entity or ism, every type of philosophy and theology that I could get my hands on, hundreds of them, searching for truth. What is the truth? And praise the Most High, He brought me back to Him, and now I know that He is true, Echad, one. But it is still to this day the sod, the mystical, that enraptures me when I read the Word. Because I know that there's more than these 5 waking senses that most people walk around with. I said recently, we don't do magic because we are magic. Doing magic is the focus of the intent externally to produce an external result. And it's blasphemy because it doesn't give credit to the Creator. Conversely, we are magic. The Spirit of the Most High is indwelt in us. The infinite resides inside of us. We are magic. You do not have because you do not ask, and you do not ask because you do not believe. Say to that mountain, move, and it will move. O ye of little faith. And that's the correct heart posture, the intent, if you will, allowing the, air quote, magic, the power and authority of the Most High to flow through you for good. And that's built into every one of us, latent in most people, but it's there. And Messiah himself engaged in it. We can see it all throughout the Gospels. And he went out from them. How? Well, he just wasn't there anymore. Or they weren't there anymore. Or for a moment, he put the lie to linear four-dimensional space-time without going too deeply there. But I believe this program was to identify gifted kids. And if you think about it, the government spends a lot of money on schools. The National Education Act in the 50s, after World War II, specifically brings up the importance of education from a defense standpoint. And we know at the same time, some of these other programs were running. Stargate and MK Ultra come to mind. The men who look at goats. That kind of harkens back to my dad's story about causing a kid to run off the road by focusing his will. You know, Joe McGonigal and astral projection and out-of-body experiences for a reconnaissance purpose, etc., etc. I think what Gate was doing was identifying the gifted kids and the gifted kids that would be problems. And I think the gifted kids, many of them, went to work once they graduated or were put on a path or stewarded in a certain direction. And I think some of us gifted problem kids, we've been having tabs kept on us our whole life. And that's bullshit. So there's no real point to this story that I've told you today other than this is real. It happened to me and years of my childhood that were missing. I mean, I can't remember most of it. I could tell you when it started. 3rd grade class with Mrs. Biddy, Biddy, Monticello Elementary School, Monticello, New York. After that, I remember a couple of football games in middle school. Oh, and I was going to college in middle school. In the 7th grade, I was taking college maths and sciences and history. That's another. High IQ is a common denominator amongst gate kids. Gate kids. So this was real. I don't know if it's still going on or not, but a door unlocked inside my brain about 24 hours ago. And a lot of this is flooding back. I will also add that these people who operate in the shadows, there is at least some of us, it appears, because I've been doing research on this last 24 hours, at least some of us, it appears, were intentionally subjected to horror, abuse, manipulation, coercion. It does not surprise me now that I am the founder and president of the board of calebhouse.org. And every fiber of my being wants to erase PDF files and restore children. And I'm not ready to talk about the particulars of that. So, were you a gate kid? What were your experiences like? That's it. That's it for today. I guess it's more of a confessional today than anything else. And I don't have this all sorted and I don't have it all unpacked. This is just the first revelation, if you will. All right, 46 minutes long. Do me a favor. If you found some value in this, or you know somebody else that might find some value in it, please share the show. Remember Giving Tuesday. We can't do what we do without y'all. And for everybody that supports what we do, I deeply, deeply appreciate you. I'll see y'all when I see you.